Welcome to Discover Dorico in April 2025. Today we'll be talking about many of the new features in Dorico 6. In the description below this video, by the way, are links to this session in German, which is also live right now. There are links also to the blog article and the version history, which has all the details, even if I don't get time to mention something today. There's also a link to our website for prices, and you can download the trial today too. On scoringnotes.com there's also a review of the features in Dorico 6 if you would like to read that one. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions, and as there are members of the team who will respond there. And if you aren't watching live, then you can also email questions, as always, to discoverdorico@steinberg.de. So let's begin. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat as always, so let's go from there. Yes, somebody says my mic's quiet. Hopefully that's more. I'll turn it up a bit. There you go. Let me know if there's any other issues. As always, of course, if you're not watching live, you can pause me and speed me up and slow me down and that kind of thing. We'll try and get through as many things today as possible, so that hopefully we can. There's a lot of things in this new version, so let's see what we can get to. So I'm going to start then. Let's have a quick roundup of a few things to start off with. So I'll show you this one. So this is the blog article on blog.dorico.com. So if you want to go and have a read of that one, as I said, there's a link in the description below this video. Our website has lots of information about prices and everything else. So if you want to find out a price in your location, then you can do that. There's also the trial button if you want it. As I said, the Scoring Notes podcast. Scoring Notes podcast. I'm sure they will do one, but the blog article is available here. The version history. This is the PDF. It's linked below. It's also in our blog article here. This has all of the information. It's 60 odd pages. There's a lot of information in it, and I will try and cover as much as we can today. And of course, if you haven't seen any already, there's also lots of brilliant videos from Anthony, where actually I've learnt things already as well about things that are new features in Dorico 6. No, I really have learnt some of the things from these videos. They're very well done, so if you want to go and have a look at some of those or a recap on any of the features, then you can do so from there as well. Tune in on Saturday for the Scoring Notes podcast with Daniel about the new features as well. So if I switch over now to Dorico 6, and we have a new section in the hub as well. So if you're using the Steinberg Hub, then you now have a What's New section. So this also links to some details about what's in the new version here. And also there's a watch video button. So if you click on that, it will take you to some of those YouTube videos that you can watch for some of the new features. The Learn section has also been changed. So there's the hands-on tutorials up here, and there are links to videos, and this will update as we go as well. So there'll be any other videos we do is in here. And also the link to the blog article is here as well. So if you have Dorico 6, then you'll get those links. There's the Create New section, of course, as we had before, with your templates and things in, and there's the Open Recent section, which has your files, and this also has a new little button here to kind of to zoom in as you click on this little button to show you a zoomed in version of the preview there, so you know which file it is you want to open. So let's have a look. I'm going to start with this file here on some proofreading options. Hopefully my mic is now also loud enough so you can hear everything. So what we have here is, I just started entering some notes. It's a very exciting piece, this one. But even at the beginning, you can see I've got just a few instruments here. Even at the beginning, Dorico will highlight to you in this new panel. So there's a new button on the right-hand side down here for proofreading, and you get a little number indication of the type of things, the number of things it's found out. So yes, I have put some deliberate things in this one, but actually some of these actually were highlighted in other projects I'd done where I suddenly realised that there were things missing, or that I'd done wrong. So things like, for example, you can click on any of these items. So if I click on this one here, you get this little purple bouncing arrow. So I'll do that again. You can see here. And so that's saying you might want to consider adding a dynamic on the first note or chord of a flow. Well, you've got one in the flute part here, but you didn't add one for the oboe part. So if you were to choose a note on use the dynamics popover, then you could add a dynamic. Now, actually, the popovers have also been updated. So here you can see this is the new dynamics popover. And the popovers, depending on which ones they are, have a few new little options. They all have this option on the left here where you can drag the popover now. So if you want to move it somewhere else, if you're entering, for example, dynamics for a singer, and the popover would be in the way, then you can move that if you need to. You can move it up out the way, or you can move it below, or wherever. So you can drag those vertically if you need to change them. It's telling you which popover it is, of course. You can type your dynamic into here. There's also the option here, if you're used to using Option or Alt which I see if I hold down the Option or Alt key, you'll see this little blue light light up. So if there are alternative options, so for example, adding a dynamic only to one voice, or in fact, if we have a look at some others, when you're doing things like the meter popover and you want to add a meter to only one instrument, those kind of things will also show you that in the popover. So this popover here has a similar button for that popover. And now that I've entered this dynamic, the proofreading panel has updated already to show me that one has now gone. So there's also things like, for example, this one here, it's saying there's multiple notes here that require the same string. So basically, I should have written these as divisi. This was pointed out to me in another score where I wasn't sure actually whether it should be divisi or not. Well, this is then saying actually yes, it should be, and the same for violin too. It's not saying the same for viola, so obviously it's okay for viola. But yes, it will highlight those kind of things. So Dorico knows you can't play all of those on a violin. I'm a sax player, I didn't realise, but it will tell you those. So there's some of the dynamic options in here as well. There's also one here that says you've only allowed 0.6 seconds to switch from oboe to cor anglais. So you might not want to do that unless they're extremely quick. So it's obviously at the current tempo, you've not really got enough time, so that's a warning. There's also this one here. There's a time signature change hidden. So I've hidden one here. You can see this is now actually a 3/4 bar. That could be accidentally. It could be that you've got your signpost turned off, or for whatever reason. It's highlighting that to you. Also, if I was to delete this one here, then you can see it's going to do another one here. It says this bar length is shorter than implied by the time signature. So because I've deleted it, actually this is a 3/4 bar still. So if you have ever added any meter changes, that kind of thing, and realised that actually it's surely Dorico should have told you or added some extra beats or anything else, it will now tell you in the proofing panel here if the bar doesn't add up. So I just press undo and put that one back. There was a couple of other things as well. So for example, if you're doing things like lyrics, when we're talking about popovers, if I do Shift L for lyrics, then the lyrics popover, again, it's movable. Tells you it's the lyrics popover. It has this spin option here, so you can change the verse numbers. So if I just use the up and down arrows on my keyboard, then I can go to chorus, so I can press the down arrow and go to 2. So you can enter lyrics this way as you would before, but it's telling you a lot more information in that readout. You can also, because option up and down, if I press option down, that would say 1 star, so that would be a translation line of lyrics for verse 1. So option shift down and up will change this little arrow. So if you needed to add lyrics above or below the staff, you previously probably would have added the lyrics and then flipped them or moved them in the properties panel. You can now do that with option shift and the arrow keys to say whether you want to enter your lyrics above or below the staff. So that's an update to that popover as well. Some of the other things over here in our proofing panel. So we've got a thing here that says the B minor key signature replaces a D major with the same accidentals. So it's just highlighting that people might not realise you've actually changed key if that's what you've actually done at that point. There's an arco technique here that it wasn't needed because you were already playing arco, so there was no reason to add it. There's also one here for the cello which isn't needed because it's assumed that's their default, that's what they will be doing automatically, even though it's the first note they've played. They don't need to know it's arco. And then there's an option here for the double basses, for the bassoons, where it says arco, and that's probably because I'd copied and pasted it from the viola or the cello line up here, and it's accidentally copied the arco as well, so it's telling me actually you don't need that because bassoons aren't going to use a bow whether you wanted to or not. There's also options like, for example, this one, where when you jump to a passage using a different time signature, it will tell you. So we're in 3/4 at this point, but it was 4/4 at the beginning. We have sections like this jump back from B minor to C major. It will tell you that that could be an issue. There's a pizzicato technique here that's repeated. So again, what I'd done, this was a copy and paste error on my part. When in a previous piece I'd taken this, I copied and pasted it later, also taken the pizzicato mark, and it wasn't needed. So all of those kind of things in the proofing panel, it will tell you about. So it can be really useful, even at the beginning of a project like this one, to kind of point out things that are potentially wrong. There's also one between flows. So here, at the beginning of the second flow, it's saying, well, actually, you might want to add an arco here because your previous flow ended with pits. So if you want to be really clear, then you should probably tell them at this point, because it knows what happened in the previous flow. And you can choose to ignore these if you don't want them. It's just an ideal way of proofreading your score, just kind of having those extra eyes to tell you if there's something that's been missing or something you might want to consider. If you want to turn some of these options off, at the top of the proofing panel here, you can turn these options off. So if I untick, for example, suggested dynamics, then it won't tell me about those in the proofing panel. You can also filter if you're looking for something in particular, because this is a big list of things that it might be able to tell you about. You can filter for those in there as well. Also in the flows, if you're only working on one particular flow and you're not worried about the others, you can untick or deselect a flow here, and otherwise it will be looking at all of the flows. It's looking at the whole project. If you decide, actually, I don't want to do any proofreading right now, there's also a button right at the bottom down here where you can turn off the proofreading and disable that. And then it becomes a big enable proofing button to turn it back on. Occasionally you'll get that task scheduled option as it looks through the project. As you make a change, especially if you've made a change to fix one of these things, then obviously it will update and tell you at that point. Somebody in the comments says they've just finished reading the version history. How did you manage to get through all of that? Yes, I don't know how you managed to, but anyway, well done. Will the vertical adjustments for popovers apply to the text popover? Well, the text one actually is a slightly different case. That does tend to move out the way if it's close to the edge of your screen, but it's actually a much more complicated dialogue, that one, rather than just a popover. So you won't get exactly all the same options in there. One thing, just while I remember as well, when you're doing things like tempos, obviously you have a popover for these, but tempos now in the library menu in paragraph styles, they are now here in paragraph styles rather than font styles. There are a few advantages to this, one of which was pointed out to me this week is that you can now change the size in the parts. So if you want a larger option for your tempos in the parts, probably the other way around, a larger option in the score and a smaller option in parts, then you can do that because they're now part of the paragraph styles. Also, you'll notice at the top of the project here, we've got this grey text here because there isn't yet a project composer entered, and you may get the same for titles and any other text items that you've got as part of your template. So this project composer, now if I double click on it, then it will actually ask me, and you can say don't do this again, but it will ask you initially, what do you want to do? Do you really want to edit the frame contents, or more likely you want to open the project info? So it will take you straight here to then add the information. So it saves you going to File, Project Info, or using the shortcut. You can just go, oh, I just need to add a composer or anything else into here, double click, open the project info, puts you in the right section. You can put your name in there, or my name if you like, and then it will update that for you. So you're then also not creating overrides, page overrides, by doing that, because it's taking you to the right place. In a similar kind of way, these instrument names are now clickable. So if I double click on this, it will take me into the editor for editing the instrument names, or editing the instrument name here. you'll notice, of course, it says clarinet in B flat 1 and it just says clarinet because all of the other things for this one are following the layout options for the transposition as they were before, and the auto numbering because there's two instruments that are the same. But just instead of going to setup mode, expanding the player, and all this kind of stuff to then find the right instrument and then do the edit names, you can now just in write mode double click on the player name and you'll get to where you want to be. Also, while I'm in this project and we're looking kind of some of these orchestral things, here is a little example, a little excerpt I've copied from somewhere else. And in this one, we also have some instrument changes. So we've got an oboe going to cor anglais, which was in this first example here, but we also have some clarinets who have B flat and A clarinets. So in previous versions of Dorico, if you're doing this kind of thing and then you turned on condensing, then it would have condensed the first instrument that they were holding, but now Dorico 6 can also condense the second instrument, so that the clarinets in A are also condensing. So if you have an instrumentalist or a couple of instrumentalists who are doubling on other instruments, then you can also condense their other instruments. Also, these instrument change labels here to tell them to change. At the moment it's saying clarinet in A. You can, in the layout options, you can change these for the instrument changes, and you can say actually only show the change of transposition. So if I just press apply, and we'll have a quick look at that, it just says in A instead of the option that was in here by default, which says clarinet in A. So there's an option there. If it's the same instrument, it's just a transposition change, then it can also, you can optionally show which way you want to do that. So that's proofreading and some popovers and some other things to do with the text in here and the condensing changes. So let's move on to something else. Let me just check. I think that yes. I'm very glad that the team are there answering the comments, because I'm not able to read all of those quick enough at the moment to respond, I'm afraid. So let's carry on and move on to this one. So this is a project called Streaming 2 by Peter. I've known Peter for a long time. He's a lovely, lovely chap. And this project he's actually started in our previous program, if you like, in Sibelius, when the team worked on that. And this project, Streaming, the first version, was done, I think, in the year 2000. And I was also amused that on Scoring Notes there is a blog article, which I guess is the current blog article for how to do cutaway type things in Sibelius. And it was Peter who actually wrote most of the information for that article, if not all of the information. So he'd been through previously and done all of the things that he needed to do, all of the multiple steps. And there's actually two, it came out as two entries in there, two articles about how to do cutaways. Now in this version, Streaming 2, he did this version, it's a rework of this, and he'd done all this in Dorico a little while ago. So what we want to do in this one is, ideally, we'd like to use cutaways in this one. You can see, basically, I'm presuming you know what cutaways are. The video probably explains more if you watch Anthony's video. But basically, lots of these spaces where there's no notes, we don't actually need to display all of those. So what we're going to do is go to the library menu and we'll go to layout options. Now for the layout I'm using, because you can do this for different layouts, you can go to Staves and Systems and Cutaways, and you can automatically cut away staves in empty bars. So I'll press apply and close. And now we have this. You can turn off these staff lines if you don't want to see them, but it's showing you a guide of where those staff lines would be. And if you double click, you could still use those. You could still enter music at that point and things would reappear. But you can see what it's done is automatically cut away any of the bits where there isn't any music. Now this piece is about 300 bars long. And you see it's just worked its way through. It's done the whole thing, and it's just a toggleable option, toggle it on and off as to when you want them. Now it may be that you want to kind of make some of this, edit some of these things and, and do various things to it. So one of the first things I think you might want to do is say, actually, how long should Dorico wait before it does a cutaway? So if I go back to my layout options, there's a minimum number of empty bars before cutting away. So for example, if I change this to 4, then you'll see here, it's now not cutting away until it gets to 4 or more bars that are empty to do that. So that could be a useful option for you for kind of a general global way of saying when do you want these things to happen. You can also do your own manual ones. So if you choose a staff and right click, then in the staff option here there are create manual cutaways, create start and create end cutaways. So you can create these, and you can also drag these signposts to be wherever you want them to be. So if I put this one about there, then it won't cut away because I've created a cutaway end. I'm also going to alt click to copy it down here, so it also won't cut away my trumpet here. You can turn these signposts off if you have a signpost shortcut, or of course you can use the view menu option. I have a shortcut for that one for cutaways. So now you can see where it's going to keep all of these to kind of keep the information. Actually, it's a bit more useful to keep some of these bars in. But you can decide manually when you want to show and hide these, as well as the global option, as is normally the Dorico way. You also might want to use, for example, here we've got a single bar, and we might want to use a coordination line to show when this actually happens in time against some of the other parts. So if you go to engrave mode and you choose an item, I'm going to choose the bar line, and I'm going to choose this one as well. So I've used Command or Control to select those two. And you can right click, and in here you can create a coordination line, which will then create this dotted line at that point. You can also drag these, so if you wanted to, if you got it wrong and you wanted to actually link it to one of the other parts, then you can also do that too. You can also create coordination lines if you want them using the jump bar. So if I wanted one here, for example, in fact, let's put one over here. If I choose these two here, and I press J for jump bar, then you could say create coord or whatever you like, and run that command. And of course the useful thing then is that because you've used the jump bar to do that, if you want to do it to somewhere else, in fact we probably ought to have had one to down there, you can just press J and press enter, and you'll get a, oops, I didn't click on 2 items, did I? There we go. That one to there, please, because it needs to know where it wants to go to and from. So I can run that and add a coordination line. So that can be a very quick way of just going through the project and adding in. You see there's another one I've already added here, and there's another one I've added here. On the subject of these lines, if I just go back to the beginning of the project, there's also some options in engraving options. So library engraving options, I'm just going to use my shortcut to get there. In the cutaways section, this is a new section, there are options for whether the staff line should protrude at the start of a cutaway or at the end of a cutaway. Also, I think, you know, I can't remember what the default was now because I've changed this one, but at the beginning of each system, if you want to actually display the names on all the clefs, then you can do that. You can see that at the beginning of this page as well. Or if you don't want to display anything at all, then you can do this so that there's nothing shown here. And the option I'd chosen at the beginning was this one, so that we had a systemic bar line here and here at the beginning of each system, and then I've added the cutaways, the coordination lines between those. There are also properties for lots of these things. So the coordination lines, they have a line style option, so you can choose what your default is. You can also add them at various other rhythmic positions. I think I had already added some like that. So they don't have to be on bar lines, because I just realized I did. Yes, here's one. So if you choose, an item and you want to link it up with something else rhythmically, you can create them at various points. You can also drag these around if you want to. And we also, in the properties panel, you can change these options locally. So as well as your engraving options, of course, you can create these. You can create a line style of various options. So if you want a dashed line and you want arrowheads, that one's got a tiny arrowhead on the top, or you could have it at the other end if you wanted to. So you have all of these options for these lines. Just depends on all the options you want and what you want to do with them all. There's options to reverse those, whether they're what they're doing with the bar line alignment and all those kind of things. So as always, you've got the global options in engraving options, and you've got these overrides for various things for those coordination lines if you need them. Also, when you're using things like the jump bar, let's just go to this one. I'll do. So when you're using the jump bar now, the jump bar has also been updated. So while I was doing create coordination line, I could run that option. But if I just typed Chord for coordination line, it can also jump me straight into the engraving options coordination line section. So if you want to use the jump bar to get to something else like that, I'll show you, as you start typing, there's all sorts of options. Some of these are commands, and some of them are, menu items that you can go to, like engraving options, or it might be in layout options, that kind of thing. So the jump bar is even more useful now. There's also commands that you can run from here. So for example, if I type hairpin end bar, then you can say, so the hairpin's ending at the beginning of a note or start of a bar. So this is something that some people have asked about. This option here, I've just pressed escape, so I'll show you first. The hairpin is going over the bar line. Some people don't like it, some people do. So you can change it manually, but you need to find the option. If you're in engraving options, you would have to go to dynamics and the gradual dynamics, and then when you scroll through the gradual dynamics, you then miss it because it's one of the advanced options. And if you expand the advanced options, you then find this option here, whether or not to cross a bar line. But if you just say from the jump bar, I want the hairpin. It was something to do with ending bars. Oops, not hairline. Oh dear, that's mine, and I don't have one. So hairpin end bar, and you choose this option. It then says, well, look, here's the option, and you can just use the arrow keys in the jump bar to say, actually, do not cross bar line, and press enter, and it will then apply that option. So you don't necessarily have to go and find the option in engraving options anymore. You can use the jump bar even to trigger off commands. Some of those have radio buttons, some of them are drop downs, some of them have buttons like that one, and you can use shortcuts to navigate those and do it all from the jump bar as well. So it's even quicker. It really is a kind of an Uber popover really now, isn't it? For all sorts of things and settings and things you can do. You can't find something, press J for jump bar, start typing. There's also a few other changes in this one that are worth mentioning here. So there's a new button up here, if you haven't noticed. There's a new button for view. And when I choose this, it says you can also turn on various things. So in write mode, here we've got the system track. Now the system track and the cycle locators, we will come on to those, signposts, which I've used the shortcut for, and show tabs, which are these things over here. So the system track, I can turn this off. See, I did have my system track in this project. And you can turn it off from that view menu option as well. So it doesn't exist anymore in the preferences. If you've previously set the preferences, the Dorico preferences for whether or not the system track appears in new projects, it may now appear in your project again. You can use that option to turn it off. If you don't want it to be there most of the time, go to View Options. The shortcut is very similar to engraving options and layout options and everything else. It's the same Command Shift or Control Shift on PC, and then V for View Options. So in here, all of your options for do you want your voice colors or notes out of range, or condensed music, or accidentals, or various other things, how you want bar numbers to look or not show up in galley view, your pages information, are you doing spreads in a particular direction, whether the invisible options are on, like the system track, and various other things, and the highlights for, are you highlighting chord symbol regions, those kind of things. They all exist in view options. So you can set all of the options that you want for what shows and what doesn't, and then you can press save as default and save that as a preference on your computer. So that's how you now set all of those options in there. And that's also, this little button is also now on the iPad version, so you can easily click on that and show things like the system track or not. So also things like in engrave mode, if I choose this one here, then you can also turn on rulers and grid. So we now have some new options as well for rulers and grid. I'm just going to turn off for a minute. We'll turn off the cutaway staff lines for a minute so we don't need to see the staff lines. So now you can see the grid lines, and you can also see at the top of the page here we have rulers. So if you're aligning things, maybe you're aligning text frames or music frames or that kind of thing, or items on the page, then you now have a grid. There are grid settings as well, and there's also ruler options. Maybe you're not using millimeters like I am. So there's grid settings for these lines and how many there are and when they appear and those kind of things you can use. But they now all exist, so you can use those grid options. There's a bit more detail on one of Anthony's videos as well, should you want it, to find out more about those rulers and grids options. Now, let's move on to another project. Bear with me a second. Let's do this one. Now, this is kind of similarly orchestral style, but a slightly different, kind of probably more film, TV media type. When you're using large time signatures, so large time signatures are on by default in our template, which is the film scoring one. But if you've set up a template or anybody else has sent you one and you want to turn them on, you probably already know in layout options, you can go to time signatures, you can turn on large time signatures, you can choose a thin style, you can press apply, and then you get large time signatures like this. You may also have found that the instruments between the brass and the strings may then show different sizes, and that's because in your engraving options for time signatures, this is all previous information, if you scroll down, then you can set the sizes for the different number of staves, and you can also say the instruments between brass and strings treat a single bracket. This is all information that was there before. So far, so good. However, if you've done anything where you need a bit more control in your project, you've added some other instruments where, especially in the middle, where you've added some other instruments and so you've got some other time signatures appear, or you need other time signatures to appear. So this example is actually from Facebook last week, I think, where somebody has a string quartet as well as their string section, and they're getting 2 sets of time signatures, and they don't need 2 sets of time signatures. So now in Dorico 6, in your layout options, because it's particular to this layout, for your time signatures, this is the automatic behavior, but you can also do manual now, and you can choose various things to do with time signatures. So if I'm just going to remove this one because I've already added it. So now you can see all of these players. These are created automatically from the families of instruments that were there. So this is the woodwind, flute to bassoon 2, and the brass, and the timpani to harp, and these are all your string players. So now if you put all of these string players, click the little plus and put them in their own group, and then you can choose whether they're going to be top or centered. So whether this time signature here is going to be in the center of all of those players or at the top. And then when I press apply, then I'll get that option. So it's effectively remove this one. If you wanted it to be centered, then you can choose this one and you can do center that one. So you can have some of them top and you can have some of them centered. So now you have all the control that you need for this to say, when do you want these time signatures to appear? So you can choose which instruments they appear on. Now for other system items, so system items are things like your tempos. You might have system text, could be a cue. Could be rehearsal marks. You can do system lines. If you're creating lines over here and you hold down Alt when you're creating your line, then it might be a system line, so it only shows once in the score, but it shows in all of the parts. Obviously, your repeat sections, they're all going to also be system type items. So if you want to control where all of those are going to sit, then in the library menu, again in layout options, because you're controlling this layout, you can go to Staves and Systems and System Attached Items. And in here, this is your families. So if you want them to sit above particular families, you can just use this dialog as you would have previously. But you can also now say specific specific players. So if you want to put any particular items on specific players, you can do. So you can see the tick boxes for some of these that I've done already. So it may be that, for example, for some reason, you need the horizontal lines to also show up on your tuba part. Sorry, not your tuba part, the tuba line in the score. Maybe a good place to put your rehearsal marks is going to be above your strings, but you don't want all of the items. Maybe you don't want the system text, just the time signatures, the tempo, and the rehearsal marks. Maybe the repeats. Maybe there's something above. We've got the string section, and we've got the string section under here, and we've got this quartet. So maybe there are particular items that you want to display above the string section, for example. So we just press apply and close, so that these items will now appear where you've selected them. So some of them are above the horns here, another item above the tubas here, and these items here above the string quartet, and these items above the string section. So you can now choose for all of your system items where you would like those to appear in the score. You've got complete control over those individual players as well as the families that you had previously, but if you need to, then you have those kind of controls. Let's just have a look. So I'm going to move on now to this section on some chord symbols. Now there's a running joke in our team, internal I suppose, but there's always somebody working on chord symbols. Actually, we've had more than one person. I think there's at least a couple of people working on chord symbols in this version. So there's all sorts of changes for chord symbols. Now, the first one is, of course, when you're adding chord symbols, editing chord symbols, the first place you really should look is in library engraving options, and you should look at these chord symbols options, because these have presets to start off with, and the Boston preset, which is the Berkeley preset really, has been updated to be a much closer set of examples and options that they want from Berkeley. If you're following their guide, the Berkeley Simple Guide of Chord Symbols. No, I can't remember what it's called, sorry. But yes, if you're following that, then yeah, choose this option first. You then have all of these other options that you want to set for how you want your chords to look. So how you want your minors or sevenths or anything else to look, then you can set all of the options in here. And this is still a good place to start. So for example, maybe you want to change the superscript 7s, for example, instead of being in line. So you could change those. So that's still a good place to change those options. Now, onto some of the other things that are newer. You now have a line to tell you the chord what the duration is. So if you can click at the end of the chord if you want to, and you can drag these out, or you can use the same shortcut you use to extend and contract everything else. So note lengths and dynamics and that kind of thing. Alt Shift and left and right, and you can change these the length of these lines. You can also change these lines. I'm just going to change this one manually. So this extender line here, you can say that the extender line style, and one of the line styles is now a curve with an arrow. So if you're saying it resolves to here, then you can also use those if you want to. There's also one the other way up. There's also options for editing those curved lines now as well if you want to. So look at those in the lines menu if you want to have a look at those. But that was a little example. If you're doing this kind of thing where you've got you need multiple rows of chords. So maybe the chord symbols, you need an extra row to show different changes. So for example here, when you're using the chords popover has also updated. You can also move it to get it out of the way if it's going to be in the way previously. You can also use the Alt option or this little button to say it's a local chord symbol, but you can now also press the up arrow as if you were using lyrics actually, and you'll see this now says 2. So we can now enter another line of chords, and these will of course be above. So I suppose for lyrics you would have said line 1 and then underneath would be line 2. In this case you're saying the next line would be above it, so you press up, you get 2. So now I can say in here we want, for example, B minor 7. I can enter in these exactly the same way I would any other chord symbol. So now I've got an extra line of chord symbols here. And it also tells you down here in the properties panel the chord symbol line when you choose each one, so it knows which line it's on. You can also parenthesize these if you want to, so you can parenthesize one or more chords at the same time, and you can also say that these brackets or parentheses are at the start or end so that you can get this kind of look. You can also, if you choose a couple of these, one or more, you can change the style. So there's thick, slender and slender tall, and there's also options for the scale. So if you want to make just the parentheses very slightly bigger for the style, then you can do that too. So that's a really neat option for those, for alternate harmony lines, and then and your chord duration lines for those things. Now, depending on the font you're using, you may find that you want to adjust spacing of things. It's the kind of thing you don't really need to look at when you're just typing text, because for text, what's called the kerning, which is how the letters stick together, if you like, or what the gaps are between the letters. That kerning is done automatically. But for chord symbols, where it's a combination, especially if you've changed the text of the music symbols like the flats versus the other fonts you're using for the normal text, then you might find that the kerning isn't always exactly correct, or exactly how you want it anyway. So I'm going to go to music fonts. I'm just going to choose Petaluma as a start. Now in here, for example, you can see that sometimes the 7 is too close. So, on this here and these here, and maybe with this flat, sometimes it's a little bit close. So the first thing we've changed is that when you're in engrave mode, if you double click on one of these chords, then you get a new editor, which is the the chord symbol kerning pairs. If you want the old editor, by the way, you can right-click and you can say chord symbols and you can say chord symbol appearance. And this has also been updated, this one, so you can use this editor if you want to. But the default behavior now, when you double-click, is this kerning pairs. There is a preference as well in Dorico Preferences if you want to change the preference back so that you get the other editor when you double-click. But this is the default behavior now. So this, for example, you can see when I choose one item, it's also showing me the other item. So this is why it's a pair of items. You're not changing all three of these, you're just changing two of these in this editor. So if I move this 7 slightly to the right, then you can see it will update in here down at the bottom here to tell me what's going on. You can also change the root of the chord, so you can see what's going on here. And then, hang on. We'll do the 7s. Yeah, let's do the 7s. So if I change this one here, it will check those. You can check it against various other roots to see how it would look. You can also change the quality of various chords to see how they'll look. So it may be, for example, that you want to adjust things like the B flat because it's too close to a flat. What was the other one we just did? What did we have when we came in here? Minor 7s, there we go. So I've adjusted those gaps. So you can adjust all these various gaps to be exactly what you need. There's also some interval options as well, so you can change those. And when you press OK, you'll then find that you'll have adjusted all of the minor 7s just very slightly, and any of the other items that you've been changing, so the flats and that kind of thing. So you can make your very slight adjustments horizontally to the kerning of all of those individual items should you need to do so. So that's the first option, and it is a good way of then applying things a bit more globally because you're getting a more standard look across all of those chords. What we've also then changed is that there's a library option for chord symbols here. So that was the chord symbol kerning pairs if you want it from a menu. The item above it is chord symbols. And in here, you can also make changes to chord symbols. So let's say, for example, here we've got an E flat major 7. So I'm going to change my E flat major 7 by typing it into here and pressing plus. So here's the chord. And maybe you also want to change, I don't know, the heights or the size of something. So it's not just the horizontal, but you want to change individual bits of the chord. So in this case, let's take the MAJ, and because it doesn't exist in the chord symbols dialog just yet, I'm going to choose MA, I'm going to make this slightly smaller, and I'm going to put it just there. So I've now adjusted the E flat major 7. So chord for this one, and I've done another change, which means it's going to override me, isn't it? Yes, hang on. Let's do this. It's going to fight me. I'll have that one instead. There we go. So I've adjusted that one, and it's only adjusted this one, but it's not adjusted this one here. So you can make individual changes to a particular chord if you need to. So here we've got this E flat major 7. This is the only one I've changed. But you can also say, but I'd like all of mine to say this. So you can apply to all roots. Now, and actually, in this particular case, this MA you could have done in the chord symbols dialog. But let's say we also wanted the flats to change, for example, and we want to apply it to all roots. So if I apply to all roots, now my B flat and my E flat have both had the same changes made. And so has this one over here. So it's changing all of the cases of that particular chord. So you've got the kerning editor for all of the gaps horizontally between things, and you've also got a way of editing individual chords but applying it to all of the roots. So I know some people previously have really wanted to create their own effectively library of chord symbols. This is exactly how I want all my chord symbols to look, and now you can do that in here, and you can apply those to all the roots. So you don't have to make changes to, in all 12 keys. You can make the changes a bit more globally and a bit quicker and easier in here. You can also do this to check the roots and things up here. You can also check the italicized version because it may be that they're different At the moment it's synchronizing with the normal appearance, but you can untick that if you want to make changes to the italicized version of the chords. There's some reset buttons in here. There's a little reset button down here as well. You can make these your save as default, your factory defaults if you want to. You can use the star button to do that as well. You can also create your own chords. So if you wanted to make, for example, let's say we want to make a G secret chord, and you press plus, Dorico says, "Are you sure you want to do that? Because we don't recognize the chord symbol that you've added." So if I press OK, it'll make me a new secret chord. And my new secret chord, I'm going to say that the popover text is sh with 2 H's. And now I need to create my chord. Now you can do this basing it from an actual existing chord symbol if you want to. You can use the intervals. You can also use the keyboard down here and type. I'm just clicking on these buttons. You can also use the MIDI listen, and you can play a note on your MIDI keyboard, or a chord, I should say, on your MIDI keyboard, and it will then build up the chord from there. So I've now made a random, doesn't really make any sense, chord, but that doesn't matter. And you can move this up and down, so you can say what it would sound like in various positions, and you can press OK, and I've now got a secret chord. Now I've done this one before in this project, so I've also gone into here and I've clicked this little pencil tool and I've edited the components, because what I wanted to show you is that in here you're normally looking at chord symbol options, but if you choose the range here, you can now search in here for things like pauses. You can find the holds and pauses section much more easily, because before it was a very, very long list. And you can add an item to here. I've already pressed add glyph. I'd removed the word secret that was in here as the text. So I can add a little glyph, and I can make my little man, because it's a little man with 2 little eyes and the top of his head as he peers over the top of your chord. So it's a secret chord. And I press OK, and now if I want to use it, I can now say in write mode, I can type in my popover and say I would like a D sh, and so I've got my D secret chord. So a slightly facetious example, but you can see you can now make your own chord symbols, your own style. Maybe you need a flat 10, sharp 10 chord. Maybe you need something else. You now have that. You can set up your own library. You can set all the things that you want to use and want to do. And as somebody's just said in the chat, thank you for making Smoothful navigation easier. No problem, Tony. So lots of options there for chord symbols and entering them and how they display. However, there's a couple of other things, just ease of life using things, which are going to make be much easier. If you choose a chord symbol and you shift click on another chord symbol, Dorico will now select all the chord symbols in between. So if you need to move a range of chord symbols just from here to here or from here to here, using shift means that it will now select all of the chord symbols in between, which is much easier. You can also select a chord symbol here and select one somewhere else, and you can use select more, which is in the edit menu, or I'm just going to use the command shift A shortcut, and it will select more, will select all the chord symbols in the middle there as well. So if you need to then copy those to somewhere else in the piece, of course that's not how you would want to move them between players, because we have other options for that, as you'll know. But if you want to copy all those to somewhere else in the piece, that's much easier. There's also options to do things like, if I say I just want these bars here with notes in, but I also now want the chord symbols, then you can use the jump bar or a new option, which is to add chord symbols to your selection. So it will just also add the chord symbols, which can be quite nice. Or if you've made a selection and you didn't actually want the notes, you actually wanted the chord symbols, but let's say you were using another program, you were expecting the chord symbols to be added, you can press J and you can say select chord symbols, and it will only select the chord symbols. So it's a bit like doing a filter, except they weren't chosen in the first place. So adding the chord symbols to the selection or selecting the chord symbols based on your selection can both be done. If you want those as a shortcut, you can add a shortcut in the key commands section. So just go preferences, key commands, and you can add those if you want to. Use a jump bar option if you want to. The choice is yours. So choosing those chord symbols so that you can then put them somewhere else, editing the chord symbols, making your own chord symbols, I think you have a lot more options now to set up all the kind of things that you would like. So I'm just going to move on to another section because I can see the comments are being answered. Thank you to Daniel and Anthony, and I'm sure Lily and other people who are also there. I'm going to go to this project. So one of the new things we've added, if you're using the SDA, so the Steinberg Download Assistant, most of the sounds are the same in Dorico, but you will see in Dorico 6 there's a new marching percussion option. So if you're doing marching percussion, and you want to do let's say, different types of marching type sounds. So the types of snares, the different types of marching tenors and bass drums, then those sounds, they're from VDL. They're a basic set from VDL. So if we just go and have a look at this, in Halion, when they load, we can go into here and have a look. We have the marching percussion basics here, so you can see they're all here. Of course, we've done the percussion maps to map to those as well. So all of the various sounds are all in here as well for the various types of drums and cymbals. So if I just press play for a second. So you get the idea. So all of those sounds are now shipped with Dorico 6. To make use of them, you may also want to need to know, if you go to Preferences, you have probably got a default playback template already set if you use a previous version of Dorico. So you may want to change the default playback template now to be one that includes the marching percussion set, because otherwise you won't hear any of those sounds because we won't load them, we'll load the previous sounds. Also, one thing I do find useful for this kind of style and others, but in particular this kind of style, and I'm just going to go to Galley View for a second, is if you make a selection now, one or more bars, doesn't matter, there's now in the play menu, there's a cycle option and the locators. So you can set cycle locators from the selection, and you see they turn up grey like this. So this is the cycle locators, is so you will cycle this music if you want to. They are grey at the moment because you need to press this button up here to turn on the cycles. Now they've gone purple. So that now if I click on a note here and press P for play, then it will cycle this section. Now you can make changes while it's doing this if you want to. So I'll just press play and make a few quick changes and you'll hear this. Obviously you can also do this for pitched instruments and change the pitch of those as well. I can't do that for these instruments because they don't have pitches as such. So if I delete these, maybe I'll repeat this. And let's say can't hear them, so let's have dynamic. Or you want to add some cymbals or something else in here, so we just add some of these in. You can change techniques. There's a sizzle technique and there's a crunch technique, and there's staccato dots. You can add some of these as well, so they'll do a choke. What else do we have in this one? And there are various different areas in the different cymbals you can add these to. We'll add a cymbal. And let's just make sure we can hear those. So, those kind of things. So the cycle locators can be used for all sorts of things when you just want to work on that little passage, make some changes rhythmically or pitch-wise or dynamics or those kind of things. You want to make changes to those and see what it would sound like straight away. It's actually, I can see now, when people have asked for this before, it's a much easier way of just working on that section, repeating it, hearing the changes, going, yep, that's fine, that's exactly what we want. Then you can also assign shortcuts to set your locators, either based on the selection or set the left and right locators. To turn the cycle on and off, you can have shortcuts, all those kind of things. If you're using them a lot, you can set your shortcuts to set the region you want to work on, and then off you go. So that's a very useful option, I think, for on the playback side of things. Also, excuse me, I switched temporarily to Galley View here, but we also have a new option down here called Fill View. I think this is probably particularly useful in small ensemble type things or even single instruments. So what Fill View does is, whereas Page View would be showing you the whole, the page with all of the other things that you need on the page and from the page template, and it's got multiple systems. Galley View is just one long continuous stream of music. We haven't got the page titles and things like that on there. We also don't. There's a default amount of space added between here. It's not doing the kind of collision avoidance type things in this view, but it's very useful for composing. But actually, fill view can also be very useful for a number of things. It's a bit more like a Cubase style view where it's filling the page with as much music as possible at the zoom level you're at, but it is also doing collision avoidance type things. So it's adding defaults amount of spacing between these, and then applying those options. So as I zoom in, you see the music changes. This is now bar 6, and now it's bar 11, and it's adding and removing information on each system so that it's all fitting, so that you can then see more of the music you're working on. It's also really useful if you're working on a smaller screen size, just for a second, or a smaller window, because it's fitting as much information as possible into that window size. So I think it's an option that some people will really like. It's available in the view menu here. So we've got page view, galley view, and fill view. So the previous shortcuts have been added with a third option. As I said, it's also available down here. And of course, you can use those shortcuts. So you can go to galley view, you can go to fill view. So yes, try that one out. I think you'll like that one for, just especially when you're working on things, not obviously doing page layout, but for working on things. And that'll be very useful to you, I think. Now let's just have a look. So the next option I want to look at, yes, there's even more. I've got to the hour, but there's a few more things that I want to show you, so bear with me. So in this project here, this is a kind of a little musical example. You may have previously used the options for flow headers, and when you've been using flow headers in engrave mode, you'll know probably that you can create new flow headers down here, and you can apply a new flow header on a page, but you can only have one type of flow header for that page. So here the problem is I'd like a vamp. I'd like actually a smaller flow header, a different flow header here. I could do it with manual overrides, but of course we want to try and avoid manual overrides and red triangles over here in the pages section. So what we'll do this time is we'll go to setup mode. For the layout I'm in the piano vocal layout. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to go to flow heading overrides. So now if I just move this a bit, now for this this vamp here, if I click plus, I can choose the flow that I'm working on, and I can choose the flow heading that I want to use. I've already made a vamp flow heading, and I can press apply, and I will now get that vamp flow heading shown here. I can also, just turning off my signpost, I can also use these margin options to override the margins if I need a specific margin here. So if I want to override the bottom margin here, then I can do that and make that a bit tighter. So I've got my normal flow headers that I've been using and the normal margins and everything else, but in this particular case I've got this one. So you can now apply different flow headers to individual flows if you want to, so that you've got, it's much quicker to get to the look and the feel that you need for that. You may also notice I'm using a slightly different font in this one, which is also now included in Dorico. If you go to the library paragraph style, so that's what I've done in this case, and for my default text I've changed it to Splentino instead of the Academico that's normally there. This is an open source version of Plantin, done by Ben Byron Wigfield. I think there's some more details on the Scoring Notes podcast and blog about this as well, I think. But yes, if you want to use this one, it's a new font that's included with Dorico. So I've just used it. I basically changed everything, because lots of things work based on paragraph styles and the default text style. So I've changed that one. So my titles have changed, and my instrument names would have changed if I was using them, and all those kind of things. These cues have changed. It's based on everything. But you can just use it for individual font styles or paragraph styles should you want to as well. There's also some other options to do with open type fonts as well. So if you're using small caps fonts and those kind of things, Dorico can also handle those. You can find those in your paragraph styles. Blimey, there's all sorts of things. So the last couple of things, when you've been making changes to things on one computer and you buy a new computer, or you're also using another computer, because of course you can use your Dorico license, you can use it on up to 3 computers for your use. So maybe you're traveling with a laptop, or you've got a computer somewhere else and you want to use the same settings, the same shortcuts that you've applied, the same view menu options that you've set, the same engraving options you've set. When you've set your defaults, you want to move all those settings from one computer to another. So let's say it's a new computer. On your old computer, go to File, Export User Settings, and it will then create a little file for you, a little zip file of all of those user settings from Dorico. On your new computer, you then go to File, Import User Settings, and you can import all of those settings if you need them onto your new computer. So that's really, really, really handy, because for things like, especially your shortcuts and that kind of thing that you've set up, you don't want to have to go and set them up again, and they were a bit fiddly getting into system folders to do in previous versions. So that's much easier. Let me have a look. There's all sorts of other things. So when you create paragraph styles and things, for things. So in fact, let's have a look at our paragraph styles. You can also choose all sorts of other things in here. So for example, I said you've also got things like your open type features. There's also the placement. If you want to make a paragraph style that's automatically above or below a staff, then you can do that. You can, if you've got syllables and you need an extender line, you can do that. You can just use Alt-Shift and the arrows. You can use the properties panel as well. So if you need extender lines for those, if you need parenthesized playing techniques, you can do that if you want to. You can also add shortcuts to your playing techniques. So all of these things. So if you've got some violin, up bow, down bow, and actually the popover is a bit slow for the way you want to do it, you can now add shortcuts to those, so you can make those even quicker to add. You can have staff labels positioned outside the music frame if you want to. If you're importing and exporting MIDI, then a MIDI file that's exported from Dorico will also include lyrics, and we'll try and import those as well if you're importing MIDI file with lyrics. If you've got text styles here and you right-click on them, you can not only change the paragraph styles, you can also change system text to staff text and vice versa. So if you've added something and you've added it as system text, then realize that it should have been staff text or vice versa, you can just change those over very easily. The music symbols editor is also easier to use. I mentioned the Smoofle search, but yes, the music symbols editor is also easier. Playback will now humanize the playback duration of notes, as well as we were doing just the velocities and dynamics. It will also humanize the duration of notes as well. The percussion maps editor is easier to use now. You can copy and paste lines. It's an easier editor to use, much easier. You can also, there's a workflow video from Anthony which has all sorts of other videos in it as well, and in links to other things. So have a look at some of those as well, and that will tell you even more things that we've included in this new version of Dorico. So I think I've just tipped over the hour, but I hope you get the idea that there are a lot of new things that you can use in Dorico. So I'm just going to have a quick check of. To be honest, I think all the comments have been answered. Yes, yeah, I can see those. So that's good. So, a quick reminder. Let's have a look in the description underneath this video. You can find a link to our blog article with details, which also includes links to Anthony's videos. There's a link to a playlist with all the videos. Here's the one on workflow improvements to look up, and notation engraving improvements and all those kind of things. So have a look at some of those videos as well. If you want to know how much it is for your update, depending on which version of Dorico you're on, then have a look in here. There's also prices on there, of course, for Dorico Elements. You can download Dorico SE6. You can also get a new version for iPad. This is also where you'll get the trial. So if you want to use the trial, you can have Dorico 5 and 6 on the same computer if you want to. So if you're worried about, not sure, you can buy the update, and then you can have both on the same computer if you want to, no problem. You can read the scoring notes podcast, listen to the podcast shortly, but you can read the scoring notes review and read the version history, because this really does contain all the information. If you want to know, does this new thing do something, then read this. If we're confused about chord symbol kerning pairs and that kind of thing, there's a lot more information in here about how all that works, and as along with all of the other features as well. So yes, have a read of all of those. It's good bedtime reading. And of course, ask us any questions if you have them. So you'll find us on social media. You'll find us in the comments section here on YouTube. You can always email discoverdorico@steinberg.de. If I get a lot of emails, it'll take me a long time to respond. You can also use our forum. So if you go to dorico.com/forum, then there's lots of chats already going on there as well this morning. So I hope that's a useful overview of lots of the new features in here. And yes, let me know what would you like to see in the next live stream when we do one. And I'll see you again then. Thank you for joining live.